All right. So the Fed has decided that it's going to extend the overnight bailout through 2020. All right. It said this yesterday. And I wanted to bring you this article from CNBC, letting you know what the situation is and giving you an update on what's going on. The Fed is extending its overnight funding operations through January 2020. The Federal Reserve be extended its temporary overnight repo operations to at least January. In addition, the central banks will be buying short duration treasury bills to at least the second quarter of 2020. Both announcements come as the Fed is looking to address issues in the short-term lending markets. The Federal Reserve will be continuing its overnight funding operations to at least January. Will start buying treasury bills next week through the second quarter of 2020. The central bank announced Friday. The T-bill purchases will be large, $60 billion in the first month. Despite Fed officials' insistence that the operation will be organic, move to grow the central bank's balance sheet and the level of bank reserves, as well as to keep the benchmark funds rate within its targeted range. The purchases will involve maturities in between 5 and 52 weeks. So these are going to be like 6 week to probably like 1 year bills. I'll be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? I don't think this is a positive thing. I think this is a backdoor way of bailing out Wall Street as far as things are concerned. There's a liquidity crisis at the moment. And I think a lot of it has to do with the baby boomers retiring. They're pulling this money out of their 401ks. I had somebody the other day tell me that they have an issue where people over the age of 72 years old have to start selling at least 5% of their portfolio every year by law. That may be something that's going to come into play here very soon as far as things are concerned, because if you have to sell off your, sell off your bonds and equities, like it's going to end up crashing the market. Following a disruption in short-term lending markets in mid-September that sent interest rates soaring, the Fed began conducting its own operations to provide financial institutions with cash in exchange for ultra-safe assets like government bonds. Most recently, the Fed said the repo operation would end November 4th. The announcement comes as Chairman Jerome Powell also said that the Fed will be expanding the size of its $4 trillion balance sheet through further short-term T-bill purchases. This is, man, look, we can't keep expanding the Fed's balance sheet. It's just going to end up causing rampant inflation. And I understand that inflation really comes from workers having more paychecks. I get that. That's really how inflation is supposed to be, not just calculated, but that's how inflation really is caused, by people having the cash to be able to buy goods, which causes an upward tick in things. But when you devalue the currency, it's going to end up buy silver and gold kind of situation. Fed officials have met by video conference on October 4th to discuss issues related to the recent pressures in money markets and monetary policy implementation. According to a news release, documents from the central bank, the overnight repurchase operations at least through January, and will be buying T-bills at least into the second quarter of next year. Jesus Christ, it's extended the whole way to June already. I think they're trying to get this in November so Trump can stay in office, is kind of the deal. On the latter operation, Powell has been adamant in pointing out that the T-bill purchases, though aimed at expanding the Fed's balance sheet and correspondingly banks' reserves, this should not be confused with the quantitative easing that occurred during and after the financial crisis. Really? Because, the Fed standing here putting money into the system is quantitative easing. That's really what this is. If the market was allowed to set rates at what they're supposed to be, which is what was happening in the overnight lending thing, because they jumped to like 5 or 6 or 10%, that's where the interest rate should be at. That's the natural process. And you're interrupting that process by bringing the rates back down by giving them liquid. That's kind of what we're doing. Under QE, the Fed sought to lower long-term rates and push the appetite for risk assets. The balance sheet expansion will be organic, Powell said, and will be targeted making sure bank reserves are plentiful and the Fed's benchmark overnight borrowing rate is within its targeted range. During the September cash crunch, the funds rate briefly rose to 5 basis points above the average. Man, look, let's be honest here. All right, this is a backdoor bailout of the financial system. Let's be perfectly honest about what's going on. Let's not stand here and sugarcoat it and try to pretend to do any of the extracurricular nonsense. Let's be perfectly real about what's going on, because that's what the situation is. This is a bailout. Plain and simple. Anytime the Fed's standing here putting new cash into the system, and I mean to try and move interest rates or to get individuals to invest more, it's a bailout. It is what it is. And that's because the banks are over leveraged again. That's fact of life. Like over short on cash. In other words, they, are higher on their leverage than they need to be. But they're going to be because, we're having a problem of less population, less individuals consuming, and more people retiring and taking their money out of the system. Well, as the baby boomers retire, this is going to happen. This is a demographic problem which cannot be solved by the Fed standing here continuing to print money. It's not going to work. It's not going to help, and it's not going to do anything. All these things need to crash. And the reason it needs to crash is the same reason that like everybody wants, all these younger millennials, they want people to stand here and have wealth distribution. It's because of the fact that as old people go away, young people are supposed to inherit their assets, and you're not allowing this to happen. You're destroying the young and feeding them to the old. This should not happen. Just being honest about things. But anyway, man. Yo, look, little quick video. I know it's only 6 minutes, but, just wanted to bring this to you and give you an update on what's going on. This is Tom Peace and Pnoid News. Make sure you subscribe. Peace.